lot of the folks in the room. At the same time, I also run an independent trading desk called ProData RX, where I support software and digital media buying services for independent agencies with a healthcare focus. So that's a little bit about me. When I put this together, I had the topic in mind, but I didn't know what the audience was going to be like. So if anybody has questions or wants to go off in a different direction, just jump right in. I'm happy to kind of speak to whatever I can and steer things in a different direction. So, sound good? Cool. So, as I said, this is the beginning of kind of the sales deck for the One Market platform. And what it starts off with is, like, what is the problem that all brands and retailers face, which is acquiring new customers and increasing the lifetime value of your existing customers. And then this last one, how do I make my paid advertising more efficient? So, no matter what size you are as a brand and a retailer, you're, trying to basically solve these problems so that you're more efficient and growing your revenue. This particular slide here talks about the really convoluted customer journey that most shoppers are going through. So, seeing ads, visiting a website, there's email channels, there's Facebook ads, search advertising, checking reviews on different sites, making purchases in store and online. All of this is, just to kind of paint the story of, having proper attribution and identifying customers and choosing the right paid advertising channel can be very complicated. So this is meant to say, stop band-aiding the problem is the title of the slide. And really what that's meant to do is address the fact that most brands and retailers today are working with point solutions. They're going to Google and doing search advertising, or they're going to Facebook and they're doing social advertising. Maybe they work with a small shop that's doing geo-targeting for them. Maybe they work with one of these like a DMP or a CDP. For those of you who don't know what that is, that's some kind of platform to save your customer base and segment them in meaningful ways. So here are my shoe shoppers, here are my high value shoppers, here are shoppers who have lapsed, things of that nature. Basically save those audiences and then activate them in meaningful ways for your paid advertising. You might also work with an email provider, a separate attribution partner. Basically this is a mess. Everybody, it's very complicated. You're licensing all these different platforms and you're siloing all of your insights. So this is the value add of the One Market, and I apologize, I said this wasn't meant to be salesy, and it's, it'll stop soon. But the idea of the One Market platform is to unify this in a customer activation platform. So being able to capture all of this data and intelligence and then activate it across channel for both in-store and online. So the idea being you're unifying all of these different point solutions and you're able to reach customers wherever they are and identify and attribute their purchases, whether they're in-store and online. So I think, Fernando, is that right? Yeah, so a lot of the foundation of this platform is really about the intelligence aspect of it, modeling those transactions and those users to put them into meaningful segments who show some intent to buy, and then being able to activate those across paid advertising channels. So I'd imagine when you talk to e-commerce customers, a lot of them are going to be interested in that. Like, how do I find the customers that want to buy or that I'm not reaching, that are in market? How can I find lookalike audiences that aren't just, on Facebook? Things like that.
Does everybody here know what a lookalike audience is?
I don't.
Okay, so you know who your existing customers are. And the ideas behind a lookalike is that people who are very similar demographically might be interested in the same exact products, which are the products you offer. So in the simplest terms, you can actually go to like Facebook, upload your existing email list, and they'll find you an audience that has similar demographics. So that's probably the simplest way to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
So it can get more complex than that, but that's basically what a lookalike audience is.
Yep, absolutely. So one of the key features of this platform when it was built, I don't know, in 2015 before I was around, it was built for this specific retail use case, which is sort of common in the industry, which is called supplier-funded media, which is that the brands that might be working with a wholesaler like Nordstrom or Kohl's or whoever can bring their money to the table and then advertise through those wholesale channels. So if I'm Nike, I'll go to Kohl's and say, here's $10,000 for you to promote my shoes. That's kind of the old school way of describing it. And how that would work on the platform is a company like Kohl's or Nordstrom would be sending their product feed and transaction feeds, so that the platform is creating all of those audiences of all of Kohl's data around all of their shoe shoppers, shirt shoppers, activewear, propensity to buy, lookalike models, and then those brands can come in and advertise against those audiences. Really powerful for somebody like Nike because they only know their own customers out of the box. But when they're going through a retailer in the supply-funded model, they can activate all of Kohl's customers. So the folks that are buying Adidas, the folks that are buying Converse, the folks that are buying Hoka shoes. They now have access to all of these audiences, and that's hugely powerful for acquiring new customers. So that theme might come up a little bit later. I don't think there's anything interesting to talk about there. So this sort of just talks about how this sort of puzzle is completed behind the hood. So the key of it is identifying your customers and identifying new customers. So this might be a little bit different than some of you might have been initially interested in this conversation. It's not so, the biggest retailers aren't thinking about, okay, what's the hottest channel right now? Do I want to be in TV? Do I want to be in native? Do I want to be in audio? And those are all things that we'll talk about. But more of the core problem that they're trying to solve is, how do I make use of my data? How do I have better analytics? How do I save my customer audiences? How do I retarget and message those people? And the way that that's done for a large retailer or a large brand using some kind of platform like the one that I'm describing is making use of their data feeds. So any sort of folks that have an e-commerce brand right now, you're probably familiar with having your product feed for advertising on Google, doing product listing ads. So having that product feed and distributing it to a platform like this or a platform like Google, and marrying that with your transaction feed so that you can actually identify which customers are buying which products, and then translating those customers into digital audiences, which you can then buy through your paid advertising channels. You can do this in Google and Facebook by sending those emails some of you might be familiar with, creating those custom audiences and segments. Very cumbersome. They also have limitations on how many custom audiences you can create, and that's by design. A lot of those big players like Google and Facebook, they act like walled gardens. They don't want to expose privacy and analytics. They want to keep everything for themselves. So it can be very cumbersome, which is why a lot of the real efficacy and things that I'll talk about sort of in the rest of the presentation is activating them through programmatic channels, which would be going through a platform called the demand side platform. Some of the big players like Google with DoubleClick Bid Manager, which is different from their search product, Media Math, The Trade Desk, and AppNexus, which is now branded Zando. These are platforms that have the ability to buy all kinds of web inventory, mobile app inventory, native inventory, audio inventory, video inventory. Basically, they are real-time exchanges. So anybody that has digital media supply, they can send it to these exchanges, and you can buy on them through the platform. Very powerful because they have automated bidding. So some of you might be familiar with just going, doing direct advertising with a website or a publisher saying, here's $10,000, put my ad on your homepage. This, by contrast, serves the ad to the homepage in real time through an auction. So you get a lot of cost savings out of that real-time bidding mechanics, but more importantly, all of your insights and audiences can live in that same platform. So whether you're trying to reach folks through audio or video or on a website or in-app, that DSP will have those same users, and you'll be able to target those segments wherever they are. So that becomes really powerful, and where I think that particular insight could be useful for a lot of folks in the room as a great cost-effective and also way to activate your data alternative to Google and Facebook. Does that make sense? Does the room know what these terms are? I'm happy to stop and explain more.
But it's awesome. Yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, you're flying through your content, but it's great.
Okay, I'll try to slow down, and if anybody has questions, please slow me down. So this is just sort of speaking to the same things that I was saying. You want to reach your customer wherever they happen to be, and you want to be able to track and attribute those touch points and then ultimately those sales. So that's often a big black box is being able to marry your online and offline actions and also make use of those audiences and also attribute which of your paid advertising is having the most effect. Because if you're not reaching them all in the same platform, or at least identifying all of those customers in the same, let's say, DMP or CDP, those customer data platforms, then you're losing out on those insights. Unimportant. So yeah, this is again just sort of painting the picture of sort of that first slide that listed out, finding new customers, increasing the value of your existing customers, and then making sure that your paid media is as efficient as possible. This just speaks to that last point, because really what by consolidating all of your paid advertising and insights with individual vendors, you get increased scale, you get increased attribution and metrics, and all of that becomes much more cost effective. So that's what that slide is speaking to. Cool. So that's sort of the end of how folks are thinking about, the largest retailers are thinking about improving their paid advertising outside of Google and Facebook. And the rest of the slides I'll talk about are different advertising channels that can be activated through programmatic, and how smaller players might be able to engage in those channels. So does anyone have any questions about kind of the first part?
Would you say this is a client relations module where you can track clients, like a CRM?
It's a different flavor of it, and in fact, like Salesforce, you would think of as sort of the main CRM. They actually have a separate DMP product. It used to be called Crux, and I think has been acquired and rebranded at this point. But it operates very similarly. So you're basically, your customers, you're identifying and you're saving them in these databases, and then segmenting them based on your product feeds and their transactions. You can then use those for, your email channel, through your direct mail channel, and then if you can connect that into a programmatic vendor, then you can activate them across the rest of your paid advertising through these channels that we're going to talk about.
So it would be a competitor of Salesforce?
Well, it'd be a similar flavor of Salesforce. So it's not, not so much geared to the kind of offline sales tracking of things, but more along the lines of identifying transactions. So it's not like, here's my lead and, now they're hot and now they're closed and these are my contact points. It's more like, this person has bought these 3 items, and so I'll bucket them into this segment, and now I'll send them this promotion.
This is more like tracking what you've actually done in stealth, which everybody knows is being done, and using that data to your advantage. Because I was looking at the little persona that he had on the last slide, and for example, if you have a customer who likes to return products, and I did a session about a year ago where we talked about how sometimes being more gracious with returns improves your bottom line, because sometimes, especially in clothing, people will, the return rate's about 30%. The trick is that if that person who returns often buys from you more often and spends more money because they know if they don't like it, they can trust you to take it back, Nordstrom approach, then you can actually make more money from that customer. But so as a smaller retailer, if you've targeted and identified those customers, then you might send out an ad to their Facebook feed or some other feed that tells them for the month of October, you're gonna pay the return shipping, on their next return or something to encourage them to come back. So the message is targeted to exactly how they buy, and that may be a better deal for you than sending out a 20% coupon when this person doesn't buy based on coupons. I mean, if you've got customers who pay full price, there's no reason for you to just offer them a coupon, and half the time they forget to use it anyway. So tailor your message to the right person in the right place, because you also have to know where they're at, and that's how it differs from Salesforce. If Salesforce tells me what I've done with you in the past, it doesn't give me any predictive idea of what you're going to do next week. That makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely, and a lot of that sort of lends itself to kind of the more mature activities of a lot of brands and retailers, which is personalization. Dynamic content through paid advertising, dynamic content through websites, a different email experience, all of that sort of stems from your customer segmentation, those audience insights that you start when you start warehousing and tracking those users. Mm-hmm.
So that applies to your existing customers. How do you you analyze data for new customers? Because with your own transactions, you can figure it out what they're buying, why are they buying your products, right? But if they're new customers, what data do you use for that, other than just like lookalike, like based on demographics or I don't know?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple of different strategies that I'll probably touch on in a couple of slides, but the main way would be to license that data from other data providers. So when you're working with programmatic vendors, they're often connected to all of these different data providers, which have propensity segments and contextual data, which might suggest a user's in-market and shopping for something based on the specific URL or app that they might be engaging with at that time. So that's another one of the advantages of working with a programmatic vendor, is being able to buy these audience segments sort of off the shelf, is what they call it. A few notable what are called data onboarders would be LiveRamp. This is a very large company where their business model is translating users into their digital identifiers. So saying, here's Greg Field and his address and his email. Now I can turn that into my browser cookies and my device IDs so that I can be reached through digital advertising. That's their core model, and what they do is actually work with a bunch of then third parties which are collecting data about folks. So financial institutions for household size, income, geographic areas, and then also any other provider that might have interesting data. I talked to one company called Silver Lake Athletics that is sort of saving those customer audiences for people who sign up for races. So it's like people who, just another data point of intent to buy athletic wear or sort of fitness enthusiasts. So they're sourcing these data from all kinds of sources, and then they can activate them through segments, and they can be purchased at directly through these platforms at a additional data cost on top of your paid media. So that's one way. Another way is sort of the model that I described previously, which is the supplier-funded model. So working with retail partners to leverage their audiences. This is, not everyone's going to have a wholesale partner that they can go through for this, but in the future, I think a lot of those partners will just sell their data publicly, and some may, in fact, be already. But that's an even better way to do it, to go, because that's very high quality data. Those are folks who have purchased from their stores that are verified, rather than sort of these financial networks that are doing more predictive modeling rather than deterministic transactions.
So is this mostly like a reporting module? It spits out reports and stuff?
Yeah, so that's definitely a big component of it. So, there's sort of the beginning side of it, which is how do I find the folks to target and message? And then the second side of it is how do I attribute these? How do I measure the effectiveness of those campaigns and spit out my return on ad spend? So completing that, making that closed loop is hugely important for any brand or retailer to know, okay, Facebook's not doing so well, so now I want to put more into my, banner channels, or I want to put more into my video channels, or this particular audience segment isn't converting as much. Maybe I need to go back and look at the underlying data, or I need to shift to, a different region or offer a different promotion. Having those advanced metrics is crucial for sort of taking the next step.
Does it already come with email lists? Like, if I wanted to attract a group that likes tennis, like for example, these are tennis players, and then you'd have like 1,000 people in the database, is that, or email list? Or?
I guess I'm not exactly sure how to frame the answer to that. For working with a programmatic channel like AppNexus, who connects into those data vendors that I just described, like LiveRamp, they'll have audience segments for fitness enthusiasts and tennis players. So you'll be able to buy those through your normal display channels or video or audio, just kind of through that ecosystem.
It's called Nexus?
AppNexus, now called Xandr.
You can buy them to get your ads in front of them. You cannot buy their email list, nor do you want to, because you violate a bunch of laws. What you can do, if you wanted an email campaign, is partner with a company that has a similar audience and make a deal where you you either pay them to send your message to their clients, or you work a swap, depending on what's in it for everybody.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And buying those email lists or personally identifiable records usually is much more cost inefficient. It's going to be expensive to buy that data. There's going to be privacy concerns around it, and then you're often limited to email or direct mail. You need to go through a separate partner to then connect that to your digital advertising.
So if like tennis, for example, want to go to Nike and try to team with them somehow? Is that what?
Nike would be a customer of tennis enthusiasts. So Nike would say, I want to promote, a new shoe that's like, sponsored by Andre Agassi or Roger Federer or something. And so they would then go, I want to buy my tennis enthusiasts. So they would go through their either agency partner or a trading desk directly and target that data segment through that programmatic channel. And then they'd serve their ad for that particular shoe to those people wherever they happen to be, across all websites and all
What
wider
would we
channels.
do if we wanted to get that audience? How would we do it?
What do you mean get it?
Or get an interest in that type of audience?
Yeah.
What steps will we do?
It's
We're not
not-
Nike.
I think
If we're not
examples
Nike,
of
we're
what
just
that's-
regular.
I think you're rolling through the process, but the examples, the things that you highlight are really helpful. I think that we get that you're really familiar with this subject matter. I think we don't understand the relationship to one market very well.
So
Yeah.
if you place an ad on Google, and I'll try to keep this simple, Facebook does the same thing. Like, for example, you can run a Facebook ad, and when you design your audience, you can say, I want people who have shown an interest in tennis.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
On a simple, you're buying permission to be in front of those audience. You are not buying the data of the people who are in that audience.
Okay.
And so what the programmatic advertising does is help you, because tennis, that's still a very broad audience. You may really want to target tennis people who typically spend this kind of money on tennis shoes and live in high zip codes or tennis shoes in December in Minnesota is probably not as hot an audience as it would be in Palm Springs. So there's a lot of different variations, and what he's saying is that the intelligence of the programmatic software is to get in front of the right audiences, but instead of just on Facebook, you can actually go across a bunch of different types of media, not just other websites, but Spotify and podcasts and mobile apps and other things.
And that's all through one market? Is that yes or
Well,
no?
one market is just the sort of platform that I'm working with, but you can do this through a number of different vendors, and I'll talk about that in a couple of
Okay,
slides.
cool.
Yeah.
That's great, yeah.
So what's the quality of these audiences? Like how accurate are they? How do they build the audience? Where they get the data? Is it just, so this guy clicked on these tennis shoes ads before, so we know he's interested in tennis shoes, or he was 6 months ago.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a great question. It really depends on the vendor that you're going through. So in the case of One Market, that data is built into the platform based on verified transactions of their customers. So they work directly with Kohl's to map those transactions. So that's pretty robust data. If you're going through some of the other data providers that we were just talking about, they can be getting their data from a number of different third parties, which might be better or worse quality. And so understanding who that vendor is can be important. Depending on what you're looking for, there's usually only one to three sort of main players in any given space. So it's not too convoluted, depending on what you're looking for.
Given space being e-commerce versus digital service provider, like you looking at verticals or given space even within like retail sales online, like different products?
Well, both segments of data can be available through different partners. So let's say, for example, you might be looking for just general demographic data. That might be available through one of these financial institutions that I was just mentioning. That'll be pretty accurate. Age, gender, household income, location. If you're looking for things around specific intent to buy, you'd probably go through a different vendor, of which they're not going to be probably as granular as you might be looking for. They'd be more like fitness enthusiasts, luxury shoppers. Some of them might be down to your sort of top tier category, women's clothing and accessories and things like that nature. You're probably not going to get down much more granular with some of these off-the-shelf providers. But there's, well, did that answer your question?
It did. I mean, I've got more questions, but I'll let you.
Well, we'll keep it coming. Why not?
So I mean, for example, if I'm using Google remarketing or PLA ads, then on there you can specify the type of audience that you want. But I assume they're just using Google's data. They're not using any other data. So I guess what I'm interested in is, like, if we look at some of these other platforms, is it data that they're gathering from people that's clicked on their ads, or are they buying data from websites that they're serving ads on, so they know the type of people on those websites? And then my follow-up question to that is, like, how does the click-through rate compare? Is it similar? Is it like a fraction of a percent that ultimately will convert through these things? Or is it higher than sort of typical remarketing ads? And I assume the ads are going to be kind of a similar sort of thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a sort of great comparison. Is like, how do these sort of off-the-shelf segments or propensity segments compare to your remarketing channels? And for remarketing is, so like you click on an ad or you go purchase on a website, a pixel will fire, and then you'll be added to that segment and retargeted. So that's probably one of the most effective and easiest ways to engage for any retailer or brand through an e-commerce site. I'm sure all of you are doing some version of this. And so that's going to be your best verified data. These are people who are actually looking and buying your products. You know that they're interested. Generally, the off-the-shelf things will perform slightly less, but they'll give you access to new customers. So that's when you look at when you sort of model out the value that those new customer acquisitions has, even though your click rate might be less when you compare it to a remarketing campaign, you're actually getting better reach and accessing new customers.
So it'd be the same with Google Display Network, but not remarketing on it, just looking for new customers.
Say that again.
So rather than, if let's say I'm advertising on Google, not Google Search, but Google Display Network, and I just want to put like display ads up, I'm not remarketing because I can set it just to go after new people. To a certain extent within Google, I can segment and look for types of people. So I guess what I'm just trying to understand is, like, how these sort of platforms you're talking about, is it the same thing or is it something different? Do they have more insight on the customers? Like should I expect my conversions to be higher with these things?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I mean, considerably more. You're going to compare to what your general branding campaigns would be for just audiences that might have some light demographic or intent data onto them. Some of the rates that we see through through this particular platform, display click rates above 1%, and like return on ad spend, 3 and 4x. I mean, it's very significant. So those types of audiences are hugely important compared to just your sort of general demographic campaigns. Mm-hmm. Cool. So the next couple of slides are kind of talking about some of the lesser known and sort of newer channels that you can activate through programmatic. So native advertising is kind of a big and growing area of paid media. Native advertising being sort of, when you think about, I go onto a website and I see maybe a standard banner, it'll just be a product for shoes on whatever news site I'm looking at. Doesn't have any contextual relevance to the page or the application that I'm in. So native advertising is the alternative to that, where the creatives and sponsored ads should seem more like a seamless experience with the content. It should feel like it's natively a part of the what you're already viewing. So I'm sure some of you are already familiar with seeing these things on websites. There'll be, it'll say sort of at the bottom of your page, you might also be interested in. They can look like product listing ads. They can be sort of like very much embedded within an article as if it's a separate article.
It's like your Facebook news feed. You may not even realize it's an ad till it catches your eye. It's just part of the feed. It looks like a regular part of the feed with usually some little icon that indicates it's sponsored.
Exactly. And the engagement on these types of channels tends to be much higher. We generally see very good results working with native advertising. Some of this native has been around for 6 or 7 years at scale, but it's been slow to grow because working with it as a channel has traditionally been very cumbersome. You've had to go directly to either an individual publisher on a specific website, or through one of these native advertising specific platforms, and have them do the custom work to create that content for you and then actually place those ads. There's been huge growth in activating this through programmatic channels. So now through these platforms like AppNexus and Google and the Trade Desk, you can do native advertising in the same way that you would standard banner display advertising. Which, as I mentioned before, is hugely impactful because you can keep those same audiences and leverage those same data segments as we were just discussing. So combining those two can really be powerful for engagement. And this particular slide right here talks about one of the sort of the newest aggregators of this native advertising, AdLikeU. So they sort of function as kind of a network, if you will, of different native content. So ways to you could engage with someone like AdLikeU directly, but as I mentioned, it's much more efficient to go through buy them through a programmatic channel. This is just another slide, sort of about the advances of native advertising. Generally higher viewability, generally better brand safety, for those same reasons that it's more difficult to buy through. But as you can see, it highlights some of the more advanced metrics: 70% viewability, 1 to 2% CTR. Those are sort of the metrics that you look for if you are a marketer, measuring your user engagement. Some of you might be familiar with those, but those are quite high for a specific paid advertising channel.
What is CTR?
CTR is a click-through rate. So how the percentage of people who have seen your ad that actually click on your ad.
So One Market doesn't run on Facebook or Google, but it runs on Spotify and some of the other choices.
So One Market actually does run on Facebook and Google in addition to programmatic advertising. You can sort of think of it as, Google is your search, Facebook is your social, and then you've got this programmatic channel which you can tie into standard banner, display, audio, native, kind of all rolled up into this one channel, because it's not a specific kind of paid advertising medium, if that makes sense.
So to run it on Facebook, I would have to pay One Market and Facebook to run it?
Well, if you wanted to work with One Market, yeah, or you could just go directly to Facebook. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you are doing this today. You just log into Facebook and.
One of the differences, and I used to use AdRoll, so is that, so if I wanted to, let's say I want to advertise on Huffington Post, I can go straight to Huffington Post. It's going to take a big wad of cash, and it's a big gamble because I don't really know until I've tested it what kind of return I'm getting on it.
Oh, yeah.
Where I can go into a programmatic system who has inventory on a bunch of sites, including the Huffington Post and Facebook and Google, and in a much more real-time basis, I can shift things around so that rather than dropping $10,000 on a maybe for the Huffington Post, I've got $10,000 to spend. I may spread it in more than one place, or I may not, but I can shift it in a darn hurry if it isn't doing what I need it to do. So that's why that a lot of times these platforms do incorporate the stuff you get. And interestingly enough, that means they also have Google inventory and MSN inventory and Facebook inventory, because everything goes into an auction base anyway. So, and when you go straight to those platforms, you're competing against the programmatic advertising platforms as well, because it's all an auction. So it's really just a matter of giving you a little bit more choice and more control over where your money is being spent.
So
Yeah.
them, it's like going to Walmart instead of going to like Macy's.
No, because they're separate retailers. It'd be more like going to Amazon, which has the same inventory Macy's has, and the same inventory Walmart has, and the same stuff JCPenney's has, and a bunch of little retailers all in the same place.
No, I guess what I'm saying, like one market buys these huge chunks of like Huffington Post, Spotify, and all that. They buy.
They
that,
just
like
They just
Walmart
go to
does,
auction
and-
on your behalf. That's really what it is. So they have access to the same platforms. Every ad you see these days, well, not every, but most of them are auctioned off. They go to the highest bidder at any given moment in time. So even if you're running Google ads, it's a combination of quality and the price you bid. So, you know, all they're doing is providing another channel into that platform, but giving you better control over where your money is spread, so you can lower your risk and ultimately improve your return.
Okay.
So this is the same sort of thing as AdWell?
Yeah, similar. And again, I don't want to necessarily focus on one market as like the only solution here. That's not the point of the presentation.
No, I
but
understand. Yeah, it just helps me position things, okay.
yeah, absolutely. One market as a platform is actually built on top of the AppNexus exchange, as are a lot of other vendors that will be doing similar things as one market is.
When you say that like Google is separate, Facebook is separate, and the rest of the things are separate, so by Google do you mean the Google owned website, which is the Google search engine, YouTube?
Google search, yeah.
So what about the third party websites? So Google, for example, Google Ad Exchange, right?
Right.
They have owned and operated websites, and they have third party websites. So for third party websites, does that come under like Google umbrella, or does that come under market umbrella?
That'd be under the programmatic umbrella. When I say Google, I mean very specifically Google search. But thank you for highlighting that. Yeah, Google, just for the room, Google has their own demand side platform similar to an AppNexus or a trade desk called DoubleClick Bid Manager (DBM). And then they also have that Google Display Network that's sort of fits in there. And both of those are them representing other websites and mobile apps and audio inventory the same way that AppNexus does or these other platforms do. So Google has both products. Cool. So another channel that's getting a lot of traction is connected TV. So obviously the budgets and dollar values are pretty high to advertise on traditional TV, but also connected TV as well. But it's definitely interesting to talk about that sort of everything, all advertising is sort of flowing more towards programmatic. It's the fastest growing channel, and sort of everything, in my mind, everything besides the walled gardens are going to kind of flow
Are
this way.
the ads that show up on these channels also personalized? Are those things where you could buy a certain demographic? Like I have DirecTV now.
Yep.
Am I seeing ads that are being aimed at me?
You bet.
Wow.
Yeah. So the AppNexus platform, and this is sort of Xander up here. I keep referencing AppNexus. They were acquired by AT&T, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago, and rebranded as
AppNexus or AppNexus?
AppNexus, APP. But they've been rebranded as Xander, and with AT&T, they owned all of this direct TV inventory. So now, through these same programmatic channels, in the same way that you would through a normal banner creative, you can advertise on direct TV. And they've since added integrations with Warner Media, so there's now HBO and all of those channels, as well as Hulu and Netflix. So the cost of those are pretty high. Just to put them in perspective, through doing a standard kind of banner creative, you're probably going to be between $150 and $3 for a paid media CPM. For some of these providers like Hulu, you're going to be like a $35 CPM, and that's before data costs. So it's quite a bit higher, but obviously a very premium channel. And just sort of interesting to note that there's a lot of growth in this area, specifically because it's being connected into programmatic, and you can now leverage those audiences and analytics in the same way.
Very cool.
What sort of targeting could you, like, I don't know if this is too specific, but like, what level of granularity, what metrics could I target by if I was looking to advertise in Sling or who?
Bless you.
Yeah, so you could, they make available for targeting content categories and specific channels. They have live sports as sort of their inventory specific channels or features that you can target. But at the same time, you can, all of those things that we've been talking about, your e-commerce audiences, your off-the-shelf data, your demographics, all of that can be targeted as well. That's sort of the beauty of this supply, if you will, this paid media channel being connected into programmatic.
And one is, the term I hear when it comes to TV is over the top.
Mhm.
Over the top advert. What does that mean?
Yeah, so I mean, OTT and connected TV basically mean the same thing. Over the top means it's coming through a set box. It's like actually on your TV. Connected TV just means it sort of applies to over the top, but could also mean you're just streaming it through your laptop, through one of these services.
Okay.
So they're sort of
So over the top is
analogous.
like cable.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually over the top is just gonna become connected TV.
Yeah.
See,
You mentioned the
Hulu's-
ICPMs, but I'm curious, what is a minimum media buy for a OTT channel like Hulu?
Don't quote me on this because they change the rates all the time. I think Hulu has like a $10,000 minimum, something
If
like
you
that.
buy directly, or can you get in cheaper through programmatic?
Usually through programmatic, yeah. But don't quote me on that because they change all the time. But like some of these others, for example, DirecTV, you can access for even cheaper. Mhm.
So that uses the cookies on the smart TV?
Yep, exactly.
Just reads it out.
Yeah, and there's so much consolidation in the industry. The reason that AT&T specifically bought the AppNexus platform and turned it into Xandr is because they have all of that customer data. Everybody who's in 100 and some million AT&T customers, they've got all of that information on it, and so they can now create a user graph. So even if they don't have sort of the traditional browser cookie, they can still identify that user.
I worked with AT&T years ago when they were first coming out with a smart TV. There's a way users can turn it off, all those settings, but a lot of people probably aren't doing that.
Yeah, and
For
how long
privacy.
they keep those settings around, I don't know, because this is where they're putting a lot of investment, for sure.
Yeah, Hulu's not on there.
Huh. I didn't make this slide, so
Okay.
I don't know
It's
why
kind
they
of weird
left
that
it
they're
off.
not on there.
Yeah, because I know that it's available, so maybe it's on the next slide. I don't know.
It's weird.
This just sort of talks about some best practices when leveraging connected TV.
So what's the difference between over the top and digital video? That's the sort of native broadcast, or someone broadcasting cable, or
Yeah, usually when people
first
talk.
run on CNN versus ads you see while streaming on the desktop.
Yeah. So usually the difference has to do with the publisher that it's coming from. So when people talk about programmatic video, they're usually meaning like pre-roll advertising in YouTube or on videos that play on CNN or NewYorkTimes.com. They're just allowing a video to be played on a not piece of video content. Whereas when people talk about connected TV, it's usually because it's coming through a specific streaming source. It's an actual like TV or movie or whatever, direct TV publisher.
So if I'm watching a game through the ESPN app, my Fire Stick, and it goes a commercial, if I was watching on cable, I would see a commercial. And oftentimes it just says, you're on commercial break, it just has an ESPN logo there. Does that mean that they don't have the capability to put an ad there, or is it they just didn't sell that inventory because it's nascent still?
I doubt they didn't sell it. There's all kinds of things that could be doing that. Maybe you had a ad blocker up. Maybe they're maybe because you're a specific paid subscription, they aren't giving you the commercials. They're just holding the time because it's on a commercial break anyway. There's lots of things. I doubt it's because they couldn't monetize you. Cool. Yeah, a lot of interesting stuff happening with connected TV. Here's just a quick kind of pricing guide that they share around. Gives you sort of a sense of what's available. These are generally the direct TV channels, so you can see like A&E television networks. You're going to get that cheaper than a $20 CPM. Some of the more premium things like ESPN and Fox are going to be above $25. And that's where you'd probably see Hulu and Netflix hovering around there too. And this is sort of to speak to your question about the difference between digital video versus streaming. This is where you're going to see a lot more of that, like $5 CPM, $6 CPM. This is digital video instead of connected TV. So you can see here, AccuWeather and like Cool Math Games, and some of the Answer Media. These are all websites, not streaming services, not actual TV content.
Cool. I know Facebook has removed, I'm doing this in the UK and here, and I can't remember for sure if it's done. It did it in the UK a long time ago, and I think it's doing it in the US, where you can no longer target by income or wealth and metrics such as that, as they're trying to clamp down on privacy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How would, if I wanted to target higher income people on something like this, like on TV, how would I go about doing it? Do they basically say, well, these channels tend to be watched by, like Bloomberg probably has more higher income people than, I can't think of one, but like
TLC.
than TLC.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, you can get that publisher level information from them. I mean, most of these people, if you talk to them or if you go to vendors that they work with, like a Xandr, they'll have media kits and they'll say, here's the general demographics of our viewership, of our audiences. So that's one way to do it. I don't really buy it. Like, publishers are going to say whatever they need to sell their inventory. The better way to do something like that, like reach high value customers, would be to buy that audience data separately and target them on those channels. So you could go to like that vendor that I was referencing before, LiveRamp. They work directly with Experian, a large financial institution, and they make segments available for household income and wealth and propensity to spend. So you can target those audience segments overlaid on video inventory.
And how does the data move from, what was it, LiveRamp, did you say?
Mm-hmm.
How does is that something that I need to manage, or LiveRamp is integrated with that and Nexus?
Totally integrated. Yep.
And how does LiveRamp charge?
They're usually on a CPM basis as well, unless you have your own direct relationship with them. So like, for example, a segment like that, you might be looking at, a $3 paid media cost and then an additional $1 CPM data cost.
Right.
Yeah, and those data costs will vary by segment. And that's kind of, I think, was it you that asked the question about like, how do you know quality versus?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because
So,
that sounds like that's more than, well, maybe Adult does it, I don't know, but if it does, I never knew that.
yeah, so I mean, they basically sort of have a whole marketplace that you can look through, and you'll see some segments that are like 30 cents a CPM. Some will be, if you're buying, like there's one particular vendor called Bombora, they do B2B segments. So you're looking specifically for like, IT professionals or CTOs. Those are gonna be like $20 data CPMs. But so there's a large range of cost and quality that you can sort of shop around for.
And what type of brands do you see getting better results through something like AppNexus than they do on Google and or Facebook advertising? Because I keep hearing that people are moving onto alternative methods all the time, and I hear about over-the-top TV, getting better returns now than Facebook and Google.
Yeah, I don't have any metrics to share with you right now. I can only sort of speak to the same insights that you're talking about, which is because you can activate more richer and robust audience data through these channels, they're getting better returns. They're getting better engagement. I don't necessarily have a white paper to give you a side-by-side comparison, but it's definitely where the market's going. And especially because this is sort of the impetus of the conversation is that these Google and Facebook channels are becoming saturated. I was doing, because the One Market platform also buys through Facebook, I was doing sort of an investigation of their average CPMs, and they've gone from like $7 to $11 just in the last year. I mean, so good for them, but you're kind of seeing those channels become saturated and too expensive, and so it just creates a lot of opportunity.
Well, to that point, I'm curious. So these programmatic channels work on a auction model as well, and I assume that as saturation becomes more prevalent there, then you'd see CPMs go up. Like, have you seen that happen yet?
Yeah, and you'll of course you'll see that happen in specific channels that are showing lots of engagement. You also see that in general seasonality. You'll see CPMs rise, around the holiday shopping season because it's built into that auction model. The advantage of those platforms that kind of cost control is that you can they have built-in optimization models. So it's not like you have to bid a flat CPM and just take what they give you. You can cost control at all times. So you can cap your bids. You can put in their out-of-the-box optimization, optimize to click-through rates or conversion rates. So there's a lot of ways that you can manage that over time. Cool. And this is just talking about Spotify supply. So it's sort of the same flavor of what I was just talking about through native and connected TV. Audio is also available through these same channels. So Spotify, Pandora, SoundCloud, Blog Talk, you were referencing earlier, these podcast networks. Another great way to engage with consumers in new channels. And those kind of offer those inherent targetings that we're sort of talking about for TV as well. You can target playlists, genres, and sort of other contextual information if you don't want to pay the extra sort of data CPM for your audience. How well those will be in an e-commerce setting, is sort of up to you. I think there's some learnings that need to happen there, but very cool that you can sort of activate that channel in the same ways. So here's kind of the part of my wrap-up slides is like how to take advantage of these programmatic channels as a smaller player, because the one market platform it's targeted, licensing that platform is like 10 grand a month, right? So not every small brand and retailer is going to be able to afford that and activate those insights. So what are things that people can do? First is just outlining some of the DSPs that I was mentioning. So these are the platforms and infrastructure that enable programmatic. This is where the actual buying and selling of the media happens. You can work with them directly, but if you're not a programmatic expert, that can be somewhat cumbersome. You might not know all of the tools, and they also usually have monthly service minimums. So if you don't happen to be advertising, you'd be paying a couple $1,000s a month in a service fee for something that you're not using. So that might not be the right fit for everybody. Although one thing I would recommend that people investigate is the Amazon advertising. So you don't need to sell your products on Amazon to take advantage of their paid media service. They have a DSP that activates their Amazon retailer data that you, not selling on Amazon, can buy against. So in this sort of how we were talking about, how do you reach new customers if you only know your own customers, that's a great way to do it. They unfortunately, if you're looking for a managed service model, I think they have a minimum spend of $35,000, which again might not sort of meet everyone's budget, but they also have.
Advertise off Amazon or just on Amazon? Because I hear a lot about Amazon advertising and I know pretty much nothing.
Yeah, so you can do both. So you can do PLAs on Amazon.com, and then they also connect into some of the same supply channels that these other providers do. Yeah, their DSP used to be called A9, and they would buy against sort of other supplies the same way that these guys would.
Cool.
So definitely something to check out. And then there's sort of this other tier of what are usually called trading desks, or you might think of them almost as an agency. They can be sort of resellers of these technology solutions. So some local ones would be Orange 142, and then sort of myself, ProDataRx. There's also a couple, Beeswax is a reseller of DoubleClick Bid Manager, and then Choozle has sort of a nice self-service offering that's built on top of AppNexus. All of these have generally lower minimums and can offer a combination of self-service and managed service, and take advantage of these programmatic channels on your behalf if you're not working with an agency intermediary, for example. Does that make sense?
What's a typical entry-level spend?
It really depends on the provider and what you're looking for. So self-service, I've seen a lot of providers that don't have any minimum spend. If you're looking for managed service, usually those providers are looking for like a $10,000 minimum campaign. This is totally anecdotal, but yeah, somewhere in that
Campaign or
ballpark.
annual spend or one period of time?
Again, it's gonna be pretty bespoke. Yeah, usually that's like a campaign, but a campaign can be 2 months, 3 months, right? You know, there can be some flexibility there. Especially if they, you know, it's a new client, they can, you know, they have their like minimums, and then you say, oh, well, you know, this is a recurring business, and some of them will.
There are options for emerging brands that have no minimum, they, if you know a little bit about what you're doing, can create creative, can set a bid, can go in and test this option out, test these channels.
So it sounds like you're looking for more of a, like an independent agency, if you're actually looking for them to do like sort of creative development and branding. Is that what you're thinking as well?
To just digging deeper on Lori's question about what's the entry level. It sounds like there's a self-service option that you could go in with $500 and, you know, as an emerging brand, if you have the ability to do creative and some way to get the creative done.
Yes, that's exactly right.
And can, you know, put a hypothesis together on, like, you know, I wanna target these audiences. You can get in for several $100s and kind of test and learn your way into higher budgets.
Yeah, exactly. And I think someone like Choozle
Would be
would be
the
a provider similar to that.
Just be careful, if your spend's too low, it can often be very difficult to get enough activity to gauge any level of success,
right.
so.
Well,
That's
and that's
interesting.
that's sort of ultimately, like, at what point in your development as a brand or retailer, whatever it is, does it make sense to get in? Like, you know, it depends, but is there kind of a rule of thumb at which point you're mature enough? And is anybody looking at that, you know, and advising smaller, you know, SMB to emerging mid-market on how to, you know, how and when to maybe think about getting into this?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, I think everybody should be thinking about these things. The sooner you get in that sort of has the incentive to solve these problems around collecting your audiences and, you know, activating your insights, which can be done with, you know, even independent of working with these partners. But you know, yeah, I don't have a good, you know, this is your revenue target, so now like spend this much on marketing, right? But it's an important question for sure.
So can you put in data from LiveRamp into something like Choozle if you're doing it self-service?
Yeah, I'm not as familiar as how good their product is today, but Choozle is built on AppNexus. So the same data that I was just talking about for LiveRamp and all of the partners that they work with can be bought through with Choozle. Okay. I don't know if they expose that exhaustively, or if they sort of curate the lists that they are able to buy. But yeah, all of those capabilities can be done through them.
And what about phone data?
It will, and the problem becomes much easier if your business is totally e-commerce rather than in-store, because all of that attribution can usually be done through those platforms. So as long as you are your sort of website manager, and if you're using Shopify or one of these other platforms, they often have built-in tools for this, you can place those conversion pixels that will funnel the insights right back to these platforms, and you'll be able to see your click-through rate, your conversion rate, and auto-optimize to those signals. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's usually like built into the product. It's not like any extra to do that in an online sense.
Okay.
Cool. And then yeah, this is just sort of what I was talking about earlier, which is a great way to sort of reach those new audiences, which I think is probably the biggest question for a lot of folks in the room, is to go through channels that have those audiences available. So Amazon's DSP, buying folks, other shoppers who are buying similar brands or in market for similar products, working with wholesale partners through the supplier-funded media channel is a great way to get started as well. And then obviously a lot of what we talked about is doing it yourself through these programmatic channels, going out and buying those audiences from LiveRamp or another provider. Cool, that's it.
Thank you, this has been wonderful.
Thank you.
Guys, questions, network, chit chat, go home, whatever.
Get a copy of those slides?
No. I apologize. I sort of took them from one market, and it's not totally cool if I share them out. So, but if you want some of the details, I'd be happy to share that with you in kind of another format.
This should be live streamed on YouTube. Well, sometimes we've had technical difficulties.
Do you have a
but,
card?
But if
I
the
do.
live stream shows up,
Oh,
I
thank you.
usually put it on
Yeah,
my, on the
absolutely.
Red Line
Oh,
Lines
nice.
channel as well, and I post it in the Facebook group.
Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
good talking with you.
thank you, everybody, for coming. Don't forget to stop at the desk and get your little thing for your parking validation.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much. Even if I forgot your last name. Some days I'm pretty blonde.
No, I appreciate all the support, because sometimes I am speaking to an audience that knows what I'm talking about, and I need to bring it back a little bit.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. I knew, not, no, not me. I should say.
Understood.
Understood what he said.
I could follow